My name is Madison Claire Bennett, and I was 33 when I met Ethan. Back then, I thought I was old enough to recognize danger when it smiled at me. I thought heartbreak would announce itself loudly, with slammed doors, cruel words, and obvious lies. I didn't know it could arrive wearing a tailored jacket, laughing at my jokes, remembering how I liked my coffee, and looking at me like I was the only woman in the room. I met Ethan on a dating app. Not one of those casual ones where people barely read your profile, but the kind that made everyone pretend they were serious about finding something real. He was 30, charming in a way that felt effortless, and almost unfairly handsome. The kind of man women noticed before he even spoke. At first, I told myself not to get attached. Men like Ethan always had options. But then we started talking, really talking. Long messages turned into phone calls, and phone calls turned into those strange late-night conversations where you reveal too much because the darkness makes honesty feel safe. He made me laugh, he listened, he remembered small things. And slowly, against every warning bell in my head, I began to believe maybe I had finally found someone who chose me because he truly saw me. Our first date only made it worse. He walked into the restaurant wearing a navy shirt, sleeves rolled up, smiling like he already knew I would forgive him for being late, even though he wasn't. I remember thinking, this is dangerous. Not because he seemed cruel, because he seemed perfect. We became official quickly. And for a while, I was happy. The kind of happy that makes you quiet because you're afraid saying it out loud might ruin it. But there was one thing I couldn't ignore. Women looked at him constantly. At restaurants, at grocery stores, at gas stations. Even when I was standing right beside him, some women would still smile too long, laugh too loudly, find excuses to speak to him. Ethan always acted amused by it, never exactly encouraging them, but never fully shutting it down either. I didn't want to be insecure. I didn't want to become the jealous girlfriend who turned every glance into a fight. So I swallowed the discomfort and told myself, trust was love. Then came the conversation I should have taken more seriously. One night, we were lying on the couch, half watching some movie neither of us cared about, when Ethan brought up the idea of hall passes. You know, that childish hypothetical where couples name one celebrity they'd be allowed to sleep with, no consequences. I laughed it off and named some actor. Ethan smiled and said his would be Scarlett Johansson. Then he leaned back, almost smug, and added, honestly, I don't think there are many celebrity women who would say no to me. He said it lightly, like a joke. But his eyes weren't joking. Something cold moved through me. I looked at him, waiting for him to laugh, to soften it, to say he was kidding. He didn't. He just smiled like he had stated a fact. I laughed because I didn't know what else to do. But that sentence stayed with me. It came back days later while I was washing dishes, while I was driving, while he kissed my forehead and called me beautiful. I kept hearing it underneath everything. I don't think there are many women who would say no to me. At the time, I didn't know that was the first crack in the mirror. The changes came slowly. Ethan started coming home later than usual. At first, it was only 20 minutes, then an hour, then 2. He used to tell me everything about his day, who annoyed him at work, what meeting dragged too long, what ridiculous thing his coworker said. But suddenly, his explanations became thin. Lost track of time. Ran into someone. Had to finish something. When I asked simple questions, he snapped. Do I need to report every minute to you now? The first time he said that, I actually apologized. I apologized for noticing, for caring, for feeling the shift in the room before he admitted anything had changed. That's what betrayal does first. It makes you question your own senses. One night, he came home, smelling faintly like perfume that wasn't mine. Not strong, just enough to make my chest tighten. He kissed my cheek, avoided my eyes, and said he had grabbed drinks with an old coworker. What coworker? I asked. He paused half a second too long. Serena, he said. I knew that name. Serena was his ex-girlfriend. He had mentioned her before, always casually, always with that careful tone people use when they're trying to sound over something they are not completely over. I asked, "You didn't think to tell me you were meeting your ex?" He sighed like I was exhausting him. "Madison, it wasn't planned. Don't make it weird." But it was already weird. And deep down, I think I knew. Not fully, not clearly, but something inside me had gone still, like my heart was bracing for impact before my mind caught up. For the next few weeks, Ethan became a stranger who still knew how to imitate my boyfriend. He said the right things, touched my hand at the right moments, smiled when he was supposed to smile. But the warmth was gone. The details were gone. The honesty was gone. And every time he came home late, I felt myself disappearing a little more. Finally, I asked him directly, "Is there someone else?" He looked at me for a long moment. Then he laughed. Not loudly, not cruelly, just enough to make me feel foolish. "No," he said. "You're letting your imagination ruin something good." I wanted to believe him. God, I wanted to believe him. But that night, while he slept beside me, I stared at the ceiling and realized love was no longer enough. Trust had left the room, and once trust leaves, every silence becomes evidence. So I made a decision I never imagined I'd make. I hired a private investigator. Hiring a private investigator felt surreal. Like something desperate women in movies did right before their lives collapsed. I remember sitting in my car outside the investigator's office for almost 15 minutes before going inside. My hands were shaking so badly I had to grip the steering wheel just to steady myself. Part of me still hoped I was overreacting, that I would waste money only to discover Ethan was innocent and I was simply becoming paranoid. But another part of me, the quieter, colder part, already knew. The investigator's office smelled faintly like old paper and burnt coffee. The man behind the desk looked to be in his 50s, calm in the way people become after witnessing too many ugly truths. He introduced himself as Daniel. I sat across from him and told him everything. The dating app. The perfect beginning. The hall pass conversation. The late nights. Serena. The way Ethan suddenly treated my concern like an inconvenience instead of pain. Daniel listened without interrupting. No judgment, no pity, just quiet attention. When I finished, he leaned back slightly and folded his hands. "You'd be surprised," he said softly, "how often intuition is right before evidence shows up." That sentence made my stomach twist. He explained that surveillance would take time because Ethan's behavior wasn't predictable enough yet. Some nights he came home early. Some nights he disappeared for hours. We agreed on 10 days. 10 days. At the time, I thought I could survive 10 days. I was wrong. Those 10 days felt longer than entire years of my life. Every morning I woke up wondering if today would be the day everything shattered completely. Every night I watched Ethan move around our apartment like nothing was wrong, while my chest felt packed with broken glass. And somehow, he became even more affectionate during those days. That was the cruelest part. He started kissing my forehead again before work, asking if I wanted takeout from my favorite place, curling an arm around me in bed like he was afraid of losing me. Sometimes guilt makes people kinder. I didn't understand that, Ben. I only knew it confused me. There were moments I nearly canceled the investigation. Moments I watched him laugh at something on television and thought maybe I had imagined the distance between us. Then he would come home at 9:30 with another vague excuse. And the cold feeling would return. One Thursday night, he walked through the door almost 2 hours late. "Traffic was insane," he muttered. But his shirt was wrinkled. Not naturally wrinkled. Wrinkled like someone had been grabbing it. I stood there in the kitchen staring at him while he poured himself water. He noticed. "What?" he asked sharply. "Nothing." "No, seriously, what?" I almost told him right then. Almost screamed that I knew he was lying. But I swallowed it because I needed certainty more than I needed release. That night, he fell asleep immediately. I didn't sleep at all. I lay beside him listening to his breathing, wondering how someone could hold you while slowly destroying you at the same time. By day 6, I stopped eating properly. Work became impossible. I reread the same emails over and over without understanding them. My coworkers asked if I was sick. I lied and said I wasn't sleeping well, which was technically true. On day 8, Ethan came home carrying flowers.
Flowers.
Bright white lilies wrapped in brown paper. "For you," he said casually. I stared at them too long, because suddenly I understood something horrifying. He was compensating. Somewhere, another woman existed between these flowers. I smiled anyway. "Thank you." He kissed me softly and smiled back, completely unaware that every act of tenderness now felt contaminated. The investigator called on the 10th day. I nearly dropped my phone when I saw the unknown number. "Ms. Bennett?" Daniel's calm voice came through. "I have what you need. We should meet in person." My heart stopped. Not metaphorically. Actually stopped. For one suspended second, the world became silent. Then everything rushed back all at once. I drove to his office in a fog. The sky was gray, heavy with rain, and I remember thinking how stupid it was that the weather looked exactly like heartbreak was supposed to look in movies. Daniel already had an envelope sitting on the desk when I arrived. Manila. Thin.
Ordinary.
Funny how something so small can destroy an entire future. He asked gently, "Do you want to see the photographs first? Or would you rather hear the summary?" I couldn't trust my voice, so I just whispered, "Tell me." He nodded once. "Your boyfriend visited the same apartment 3 separate nights. Same building, same woman."
Woman.
Even hearing the word hurt. He stayed approximately 2 hours each visit. Physical contact was observed before entering and after leaving. I closed my eyes. Physical contact. Such clinical words for devastation. Daniel slid the envelope toward me, carefully, almost respectfully. Inside were photographs. The first showed Ethan outside an apartment building downtown. The second showed Serena opening the door. The third showed him kissing her. Not a drunk mistake. Not confusion. Not hesitation. A kiss that looked practiced.
Comfortable. Intimate.
I stared at the photo so long, the edges blurred. There it was. The truth. All the little lies suddenly snapped together into one unbearable picture. The late nights, the defensiveness, the perfume, the distance. Every instinct I tried to silence had been right. I thought I would cry immediately. Instead, I felt strangely numb. Like my body had decided pain that large needed to wait its turn. Daniel said something about taking care of myself, about not making impulsive decisions, about how people often reacted emotionally after confirmation. I barely heard him. All I could think was, he came home after kissing her. He touched me after touching her. He looked me in the eyes and lied over and over again. By the time I got back to my car, the numbness cracked. I gripped the steering wheel and finally broke. Not delicate crying, not movie tears. The kind that tears itself out of you so violently you can't breathe properly. I cried for the relationship. For the future I thought I had. For the woman I had been before suspicion turned me into someone who hired strangers to follow the man she loved. But underneath the grief, something else was forming. Anger. Cold. Sharp. Alive. And for the first time in weeks, I stopped doubting myself. I knew exactly what I had to do next. I was going to confront Ethan. And somewhere deep down, I think part of me already knew that the betrayal itself wasn't going to be the worst part. The worst part would be how little remorse he felt once he got caught. When I got home, Ethan was sitting on the couch, scrolling through his phone like it was any other night. Like my entire world hadn't just collapsed inside a manila envelope. The television cast soft blue light across his face. He looked comfortable, relaxed, safe. That hurt more than I expected. For one terrifying second, I almost pretended nothing had happened. Almost delayed the confrontation another night just so I could hold on to ignorance a little longer. But then he looked up and smiled. And I remembered the photograph of him kissing Serena. "Hey," he said casually. "You okay? You look tired." I stared at him. At the mouth that lied to me. At the eyes I once trusted more than my own instincts. "We need to talk." Something in my voice changed the room instantly. His smile faded. Slowly, he locked his phone and set it down beside him. "Okay." I stayed standing because sitting felt too vulnerable. "I know about Serena." The silence afterward was enormous. Ethan blinked once. Twice. Then he leaned back slightly, studying me carefully. "What are you talking about?" I almost laughed. Not because it was funny. Because even now, he was still trying to lie first. "I hired a private investigator." That landed. I saw it immediately. A flicker behind his eyes. Tiny, but unmistakable.
Shock.
Then calculation. Then annoyance. Not guilt.
Annoyance.
As if I had broken some unspoken rule by discovering the truth. I told him everything. The apartment. The surveillance. The photographs. The investigator. Each sentence felt like dragging broken glass out of my chest. And Ethan just sat there, listening.
Silent.
No denial. No apology. No panic. Nothing. The more he said nothing, the angrier I became. "How long?" I asked. He rubbed a hand across his jaw before answering. "A few months." "A few months." The room tilted slightly. All those nights. All those lies. Months. "You slept beside me after being with her?" He sighed. Actually sighed. Like I was exhausting him. "Madison?" "No, don't Madison me." For the first time since walking into the apartment, my voice cracked with fury. "Did you think I'd never find out? It wasn't supposed to become serious." I stared at him in disbelief. That was his explanation? Not, "I'm sorry." Not, "I made a mistake." Just, it wasn't supposed to become serious. I laughed bitterly. "You know what's insane?" I whispered. I kept blaming myself. I thought maybe I was insecure. Maybe I was imagining things. Ethan stood slowly. And then everything somehow became worse. Because he smiled. Not kindly. Not apologetically.
Condescendingly.
"You're acting like I murdered someone." I actually felt my heartbeat stutter. "What?" "It was sex, Madison. That's it." The coldness in his tone terrified me more than yelling would have. He walked toward the kitchen casually, grabbing a glass of water, while my entire life burned down around us. "I mean, seriously," he continued. "You hired a private investigator over this?" Over this. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "You cheated on me." "And?" he snapped suddenly. "People cheat sometimes. Relationships survive it all the time." I shook my head slowly, stunned beyond anger for a moment. "You don't even care." That's when he laughed. A short, arrogant little laugh I will never forget for the rest of my life. And then came the speech that destroyed whatever love I still had for him. "You really want to leave me over one mistake?" he asked. "Think carefully before you answer that." He stepped closer. "You honestly think you're going to find someone like me again?" There it was. The same arrogance from the hall pass conversation. Only uglier now. More honest. Raw. "I'm not trying to be cruel," he continued, though his voice was exactly that. "But let's be realistic here. Men like me have options. You know that." I felt physically sick. You should be grateful this relationship was even real in the first place. My eyes widened. Grateful? He kept going, almost enjoying himself now. I had a little excitement on the side. So what? It didn't change what we had. What we had. I suddenly realized Ethan genuinely believed he was the prize. That I should tolerate humiliation because being loved by him was supposedly compensation enough. You think another guy is going to look at you the way I did? He asked quietly. Please. Something inside me snapped. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just completely. All the grief burned away at once, leaving only fury. You are pathetic. His expression hardened immediately. I stepped closer, my voice shaking now. No, seriously, you think being attractive makes you special enough to betray people and still deserve loyalty? Madison. No, listen to me for once. I pointed toward the door. You cheated on me for months, lied to my face every single day, and somehow you still found a way to act like I should feel lucky. His jaw tightened. You're overreacting. That sentence. God. That sentence nearly made me lose control. Instead, I looked him directly in the eyes and said quietly, I despise you. For the first time that night, he looked genuinely affected. Only for a second. Then, the arrogance returned. You'll calm down, he muttered. You always do. I stared at him and realized he truly believed I would stay. That was the worst part. Not the cheating. Not Serena. Not even the lies. It was the certainty in his face that I loved him too much to leave. Without another word, I grabbed my keys and walked out. He didn't stop me, didn't chase me, didn't apologize. Behind me, I heard him call casually, You'll be back tomorrow. I spent the night in a cheap motel near the highway. The room smelled like stale air and old detergent. Cars hissed past outside, while I lay fully dressed on top of the blankets, staring at the ceiling. I replayed the confrontation over and over again. The laughing. The entitlement. The way he looked at me like I was unreasonable for being destroyed. Sometime around 3 a.m., I started crying again. Not because I missed him, because I realized I never truly knew him. The next morning, I went back to the apartment to collect some clothes and essentials. I hoped he'd be gone. He wasn't. Ethan stood in the kitchen drinking coffee when I walked in. And unbelievably, he smirked. I knew you'd come back. The confidence in his voice made my skin crawl. Like he genuinely believed one night apart had fixed everything. I ignored him and walked straight to the bedroom. He followed slowly. You done being dramatic? I opened drawers silently, stuffing clothes into a bag. Madison? Nothing. Seriously? Finally, I looked at him. I'm leaving. The smirk disappeared. Not entirely. Just enough for uncertainty to creep in. You're not serious. I am. You're throwing away our entire relationship over sex? I zipped the bag hard enough to startle both of us. No, I said quietly. I'm leaving because you don't think you did anything wrong. That hit him harder than the screaming had. For the first time, Ethan looked unsettled. I walked past him toward the front door. You'll regret this, he said coldly. I paused briefly, then answered without turning around. The only thing I regret is loving you longer than I should have. And this time, when I walked out, I didn't look back. The first few weeks after leaving Ethan felt unreal. Like surviving a car accident and still hearing the crash in your head long after the impact. I stayed with a friend temporarily while searching for my own apartment. During the day, I functioned well enough to appear normal. I went to work, answered emails, smiled when people expected me to smile. At night, though, everything unraveled. That's when the memories came back. Not the good memories. The manipulative ones. The moments that suddenly made sense now. How Ethan always needed admiration. How he subtly compared himself to other men. How every compliment he gave me somehow felt like he was granting approval instead of expressing love. And worst of all, I still missed him sometimes. That was the humiliating truth nobody talks about after betrayal. You can know someone treated you terribly and still ache for the version of them you thought existed. Ethan texted constantly after I left. At first, the messages were mocking. "You seriously still doing this? You'll calm down eventually. You're embarrassing yourself." Then came anger. "You invaded my privacy. You hired someone to stalk me like a psycho." And finally, panic. "I made a mistake. Can we please talk? I love you." Funny how love always appeared after consequences arrived. I blocked him eventually, but not before one final message slipped through. "I hope you realize you'll never find another man like me." I stared at that text for a long time. A year ago, it would have destroyed me. Now, it only made me sad. Because Ethan genuinely believed his beauty excused his cruelty. And maybe the saddest part was that plenty of people had probably reinforced that belief his entire life. Months passed. Slowly, painfully, I began rebuilding myself. I moved into a smaller apartment with terrible lighting and squeaky floors. I started going to therapy. I reconnected with friends I had unintentionally neglected during my relationship. I even learned how much quieter life feels when you're no longer constantly trying to earn someone's affection. Then came my 15-year high school reunion. I almost didn't go. The idea sounded exhausting. Loud music, forced nostalgia, people pretending they hadn't spent years comparing themselves to each other online. But my friends convinced me. "Worst case," one of them said, "you get free drinks and funny stories." So I went. And honestly, it was fun. For the first time in a long while, I laughed without forcing it. Everyone looked older, softer somehow. Former athletes now had back pain. Former mean girls suddenly sold skincare online and talked about mindfulness. It was strangely comforting. Then I heard a familiar name. Julian Hayes. Back in high school, Julian had been one of those boys everyone noticed immediately. Tall, effortlessly handsome, athletic without trying too hard about it. But unlike Ethan, Julian never carried himself like he was better than everyone else. He was kind. That's what I remembered most. After graduation, Julian became a model, an actual, successful international model. Magazine campaigns, fashion ads, runways in Europe, the whole thing. I hadn't seen him in years. Apparently, he hadn't attended the reunion, but his best friend Olivia had. I wandered over to say hello, and somehow Julian came up in conversation. The moment I mentioned his name, Olivia grinned. An immediate, mischievous grin. "What?" I laughed nervously. "Oh my God," she said. "He's going to kill me for telling you this." "Telling me what?" She leaned closer, dramatically. "Julian had the biggest crush on you in high school." I blinked. "What?" "I'm serious." I laughed immediately because the idea sounded absurd. Julian Hayes? The guy who now looked like he belonged on giant perfume billboards? No chance. Olivia rolled her eyes. "You genuinely had no idea?" "Absolutely not. He used to ask about you constantly." I stared at her, stunned. Apparently, Julian had even asked Olivia before the reunion whether I might be attending. "He said he always regretted never asking you out," she admitted. Something warm flickered through me. Not because he was a model. Not because he was attractive. But because after everything Ethan had said to me, after months of being made to feel small and replaceable, hearing that someone had quietly liked me all those years felt strangely healing. Like discovering maybe I had never been difficult to love at all. The next day, I found Julian on Instagram. I stared at his profile for almost 10 minutes before messaging him. "Hey stranger, heard you skipped the reunion." Then I immediately regretted sending it. Too eager. Too awkward. Too late to unsend. 5 days passed. Nothing. I assumed Olivia had exaggerated everything. Then suddenly my phone buzzed while I was making coffee before work. Madison? The extra question marks made me smile instantly. We started talking. And talking. And talking. Hours disappeared effortlessly between us. Julian was living in Brussels temporarily for a campaign, but despite the distance, our conversations felt easy in a way I hadn't experienced in years. There was no performance, no power game, no subtle attempts to make me feel lucky just for being chosen. He asked questions and actually listened to the answers. After a week, we moved from messages to FaceTime calls. The first video call lasted almost 4 hours. At one point, Julian laughed and said, "You know, teenage me is freaking out right now." I smiled. Why? Because you're somehow even prettier than I remembered. Simple.
Sincere.
No manipulation hidden underneath. I almost cried after we hung up. Not because I was sad, because I had forgotten affection could feel safe. Over the next few months, we became inseparable, despite living thousands of miles apart. Julian showed me pieces of his world: photo shoots, fashion events, tiny cafes hidden in Brussels streets. Meanwhile, I showed him my ordinary life back home, and somehow he treated every detail like it mattered. One night during a FaceTime call, he suddenly asked, "So, what exactly are we?" I laughed nervously. "You tell me." He smiled softly. "I know what I want us to be." That's how Julian became my boyfriend. And honestly, loving him felt nothing like loving Ethan. With Ethan, I constantly feared losing him. With Julian, I never once felt like I had to compete for basic respect. A few months later, I flew to Brussels to visit him. The trip felt unreal. The city glowed gold at night. Rain shimmered against old buildings. Julian held my hand through crowded streets like he was proud to be seen with me. One afternoon, he brought me to one of his photo shoots. Watching him work was surreal. Cameras flashed while stylists adjusted clothing, and photographers barked instructions in multiple languages. But every few minutes, Julian looked toward me. And every single time, he smiled. Not performatively. Not arrogantly. Just happy I was there. That was when I finally understood the difference between confidence and vanity. Ethan needed admiration from everyone. Julian only needed sincerity from the people he loved. Of course, eventually Ethan found out about Julian. Probably through mutual friends, maybe social media, I don't know. One night, he messaged me on Instagram after nearly a year of silence. "So the rebound is a model now?" Predictable. I stared at the message. Old me would have ignored it. But old wounds still have teeth sometimes. So I replied, "You once told me I'd never find another man like you." Typing indicator.
Disappearing.
Returning. I continued anyway. "Thank God you were right." Several minutes passed before he answered. "Cute." I looked over at Julian, asleep beside me in our Brussels hotel room, one arm stretched across the bed toward my side, even in sleep. Then I typed one final message. "If you thought you were out of my league, Julian is from another universe." Petty? Maybe. But after everything he stole from my self-worth, I allowed myself that moment. Then I blocked him forever. And honestly, that was the real ending of the story. Not the cheating. Not the confrontation. Not even Brussels. The real ending was finally understanding that love should never make you feel grateful for being tolerated. Today, Julian and I are still together. Sometimes I catch him staring at me, the same way he apparently did back in high school, like he still can't believe I'm real. And every time he does, I think about the woman I used to be. The woman who once believed betrayal was the price of loving someone beautiful. She would never recognize me now. And thank God for that.